The night was black as ink. The stars above Italy's jagged ridges shone faintly, but the world below was swallowed by shadows. You crouch among exhausted men, boots sinking into the damp earth, the stench of cordite and sweat still heavy from the day's bombardments. Somewhere beyond the silence lies Kesselring's line, an iron wall of German fortifications carved into mountainsides, bristling with machine guns and mortars. They call it the Gothic line. You call it impossible. But tonight, America is gambling everything on the impossible. Orders pass in whispers. Rope coils are checked, bayonets fixed, helmets pulled low. The cliffs ahead are sheer, unyielding, jagged like broken teeth. No sane commander would send men up there in darkness. Yet this is exactly the plan. Scale the night cliffs, silent as ghosts, and strike where the enemy believes no human can come. Somewhere in the darkness, a young private breathes quick prayers. A sergeant mutters curses under his breath. Far above, German sentries smoke and laugh, convinced no American dares climb their ridge. They don't know that history is about to change. The question is, will you survive the climb, or vanish into the black abyss of Italy's mountains? Can an army break a fortress in the dark? The mountains loom like giants. You stare upward, the ridgeline vanishing into night, wondering if any force on earth can dislodge the enemy perched above. It is August 1944, and Field Marshal Albert Kesselring has turned Italy's northern spine into a fortress. His Gothic line stretches across the Apennines, a barrier of bunkers, minefields, and razor wire. 4 months, the Allies have battered their way up the Italian peninsula, through Salerno, through Anzio, through Rome itself. Yet here, before these ridges, momentum slows. And Kesselring knows it. He was no ordinary commander. Kesselring, the smiling fox of the Luftwaffe, had a reputation for cunning. He turned terrain into a weapon, making every valley a trap, every ridge a wall of fire. His men, seasoned paratroopers, veterans of Russia and France, wait with rifles ready, confident that the Americans will break upon these cliffs like waves against rock. They had time, tools, and terrain on their side. Yet, on this night, the American Fifth Army prepares a gamble that borders on madness. They will not march straight into the guns. They will not waste lives battering against walls of steel. Instead, they will climb. You can hear it in the whispers of men waiting in the darkness. Some clutch rosaries, others rub soil between their palms, grounding themselves before the impossible. Rope teams are forming. Scouts whisper the route, pointing toward black cliffs that rise like knives into the sky. If the Germans believe no human can scale them, perhaps, just perhaps, that disbelief can be turned into a weapon. The gamble belongs to General Mark Clark's forces. His army is stretched thin, battered by years of Italian campaigning. Yet he sees opportunity. The Germans expect a frontal assault at dawn. Instead, Clark orders his men to become shadows, climbers in the night, hunters in the dark. The objective: breach Kesselring's ridge by surprise, turn his strongest fortress into a weakness, and open the gates of northern Italy. The tension is unbearable as the first squads approach the base of the cliffs. The world is silent except for the pounding of hearts and the clinking of metal on rock. One slip, one sound too loud, and the Germans above will unleash storms of bullets. You imagine the hands of those soldiers, calloused, trembling, wet with sweat, as they grope for handholds invisible in the dark. Every movement is blind faith. And high above, sentries smoke casually, their laughter drifting faintly down the cliffs. They cannot imagine what is coming. To them the night is safe. To them these mountains are impenetrable. They have no idea that American soldiers are already on the climb, silent, relentless, and desperate. History hangs on fingertips that cling to rock. You wonder, how many will make it? How many will fall before reaching the ridge? And if they do make it, what waits beyond? Fortifications, ambushes, or perhaps victory itself? The Gothic line was not just barbed wire and bunkers. It was psychology. Kesselring believed the Allies would break their morale against Italy's mountains, that endless hardship would sap their will. Soldiers had already endured mud-filled foxholes, malaria in the valleys, and artillery that never seemed to rest. Now they faced cliffs under moonlight with no guarantee of survival. Still they climbed. Inch by inch. Rope by rope. Breath by shallow breath. Behind them, Italy's valleys stretched silent. Ahead, death or triumph waited. In those moments, war felt less like strategy and more like raw survival. Every soldier was reduced to a single truth: do not fall, do not cry out, do not let go. And as you follow them upward, as you feel the cold stone cut into palms, you cannot help but ask, can courage truly conquer stone walls, or will these men vanish into the abyss, leaving Kesselring's ridge unbroken? What happens when shadows reach the summit? The ridge is near. But what awaits when boots finally scrape over its jagged edge? Will silence greet them, or gunfire? The first climbers are close to the crest. Their arms ache, their fingers are raw, but adrenaline pushes them higher. The rope teams pull upward, hauling themselves into a world where air feels thin and every second seems stolen. Behind them, the valley sinks into darkness. Ahead, just meters away, the enemy fortress lies unaware. Or so the men pray. Suddenly you hear it, the crunch of gravel under boots. A sentry patrol. A German voice drifts over the ridge, laughing at some crude joke, the glow of a cigarette dangling in the air. The climbers freeze, pressed against cold stone, hearts thundering in their throats. If the guard peers down, if a match flickers just a little brighter, the secret ends here, in a hail of bullets, in screams tumbling down the cliff. But fate is cruel and kind. The guard wanders off, stamping his feet against the night chill, never suspecting death waits below. The climbers exhale silently and surge upward again. When the first helmet crests the ridge, history trembles. The Gothic line is breached, not with artillery, not with tanks, but with human hands clinging to stone. The Americans rise like wraiths, bayonets ready, eyes burning with disbelief at their own success. The cliff that Kesselring trusted as shield is now a doorway. Yet the doorway opens into fire. The first outpost looms ahead, sandbags, barbed wire, a dug-in machine gun pointing toward the valley floor. The Germans are relaxed, rifles stacked, their confidence absolute. To them the cliff is impossible. No one climbs impossible walls. But then, an American sergeant lunges from the dark. A knife flashes. A sentry falls without a cry. Another turns, eyes wide, and a bayonet pierces his chest before he can shout. Chaos erupts in whispers of steel and muffled gasps. The outpost collapses before a single bullet is fired. Surprise has been achieved. But can it last? Because not far beyond, larger bunkers wait. These are the fortresses of Kesselring's design. Concrete teeth dug into mountain stone, each with fields of fire overlapping, each with radios ready to call down artillery storms. If a single alarm reaches them, the entire climb may turn into slaughter. The Americans scatter across the ridge, hugging shadows, moving like hunters across a forest floor. You can hear the scrape of boots, the quick breaths of men trying not to panic. Each moment is stretched thin as glass. Each second could shatter into gunfire. Back in the valley, more men begin to climb. They are slower, burdened with heavier packs, mortar tubes, extra ammunition, radio equipment. They must reach the top before dawn or the attack collapses. Every rope trembles with men pulling themselves toward fate. Some slip. Some fall. A muffled scream cuts the night and echoes downward, swallowed by darkness. The climbers above hear it but cannot stop. They cannot even look. War is merciless, and the living must climb over the silence of the dead. Meanwhile, Kesselring sits miles away in his command post, convinced that the Americans will attack in daylight with tanks. Reports from the ridge are calm. His officers reassure him. The line is strong, the men are steady, the cliffs are impregnable. He smiles that sly fox's smile, believing time is his ally. He does not yet know that shadows are crawling through his walls. The moment of truth comes when the first bunker ahead stirs. A German soldier yawns, steps outside, and freezes at the sight of figures moving where none should be. His cry slices through the night. A rifle fires. The silence breaks. Bullets whip through darkness. Tracers carve red arcs across the ridge. The Americans dive behind rocks, answering with bursts of fire. The night cliff assault has begun in earnest. You feel the fear in every heartbeat. You taste gunpowder in the air. And you wonder, can surprise survive gunfire, or will the ridge swallow its invaders in flame? Can the ridge hold against the storm? The ridge is taken, but can it be held? When the night ends and dawn reveals the truth, will the Americans still stand upon these cliffs? Or will Kesselring's storm wash them away? The first light of morning creeps across the Apennines. The shadows that had cloaked the Americans are gone, and with them vanishes the gift of invisibility. Now they crouch among rocks, gripping their rifles tighter, staring into the valleys below where German reinforcements stir like a waking beast. The silence of night is shattered by the roar of artillery. Shells arc upward, exploding across the ridge in sprays of dirt and stone. The men who climbed in whispers now fight in thunder. German infantry push forward, their helmets glinting in the sun, their machine guns barking from hidden nests. They are furious, shocked that their fortress has been breached, but determined to reclaim it before the breach widens. Waves of soldiers scramble up goat paths and ravines, shouting orders in harsh German syllables. To the Americans it looks like an avalanche of steel and fire. And yet they do not retreat. Sergeants bark commands. Mortars are dragged into position, their crews working with frantic speed. Radios crackle as forward observers call down supporting fire. American artillery in the valleys answers, their shells screaming overhead and bursting among the German ranks. The ridge becomes a cauldron, smoke curling upward in greasy plumes, the air thick with dust and screams. In the midst of the chaos you glimpse the faces of the men. One soldier, barely 20, fires until his rifle jams, then claws at the mechanism with trembling hands. Another, wounded in the leg, refuses evacuation and keeps loading belts for a machine gun crew. There is no thought of surrender here. Only survival, only holding the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. And yet the question lingers, how long can flesh withstand stone and steel? From his headquarters, Kesselring seethes. Reports pour in, Americans on the ridge, bunkers lost, outposts silenced. His pride is wounded, but his mind sharpens. He orders counterattacks, artillery barrages, and air strikes. The Luftwaffe, though diminished, sends fighters and bombers to claw at the ridge. Stuka dive bombers howl as they descend, their sirens shrieking terror. Explosions rock the mountaintop, blasting men from cover, shattering stones into deadly fragments. Still the Americans cling to their prize. They fight from craters, from shattered bunkers, from the very bones of the mountain. The ridge becomes more than ground, it becomes identity, a symbol that cannot be lost. As the hours pass, reinforcements arrive, climbing the same nightmarish cliffs with ropes and sheer will. Ammunition is hauled upward in bloodied hands, water canisters passed along chains of exhausted men. Casualties mount, yet the line holds. The impossible climb has become an impossible defense. But war is never so simple. The Germans adapt. They probe the flanks, searching for weak points, driving machine gun fire into crevices where men hide. They know the ridge cannot be allowed to stay in enemy hands. Every moment the Americans hold it, Kesselring's great Gothic line unravels. The question twists like a knife in every soldier's mind. Can we hold until nightfall? Can we survive one more bombardment, one more charge, one more scream? The ridge shakes under the fury of war. And you, standing in imagination among them, realize the battle is not just for stone, but for the soul of an army. Will reinforcements arrive before the ridge breaks? The ridge bleeds. Smoke curls over shattered rocks, the cries of wounded men mix with the thunder of artillery, and still the Germans press forward. You ask yourself, how much longer can these exhausted soldiers hold? Will reinforcements climb in time, or will the ridge collapse into silence and defeat? By midday the Americans are nearly spent. Their ammunition runs low. The water carried up the cliffs is gone, leaving throats dry and cracked. Every man feels the weight of fatigue pressing into his bones. The ridge that seemed a prize in the night now feels like a coffin at noon. Yet surrender is unthinkable. German attacks grow fiercer. From hidden ravines, squads storm upward, hurling grenades into foxholes, spraying gunfire across the summit. Each charge feels endless, like a tide that will never recede. Still the defenders cling on. Mortar teams fire until barrels glow red. Riflemen count bullets one by one, saving the last round for the man closest to them. The fight has become intimate, personal, a test of endurance more than strategy. Far below, reinforcements struggle up the same treacherous cliffs. Their packs are heavy, their breath ragged, but they climb with a singular purpose, to reach their brothers before it is too late. Some fall. Some never rise again. But still the chain of climbers grows, dragging supplies and strength toward the embattled crest. Kesselring senses the danger. He orders his commanders to throw everything at the ridge, to seal the breach before it spreads. Tanks cannot climb cliffs, but artillery can tear them apart. 4 hours, the mountains shake with explosions, as if the very earth rebels against the men clinging to it. And yet, even as shells rain down, the Americans refuse to yield. A captured bunker becomes their fortress. German machine guns, once aimed at the valley, are turned outward against their former masters. Each stone, each trench, each shard of concrete becomes a weapon. The ridge itself, once Kesselring's shield, now belongs to the enemy. The cost is staggering. Blood soaks the soil. Friends die inches away. Men who shared cigarettes in silence last night now lie broken in the dust. Yet the survivors fight on, eyes hollow, spirits burning. They are not just soldiers now. They are symbols, proof that courage can climb mountains, proof that even the strongest fortress can crack. Then, at last, the reinforcements arrive. Fresh men scramble onto the summit, hauling crates of ammunition, carrying stretchers, shouting encouragement. The tide shifts. For the first time since dawn, the Americans breathe hope. Rifles are reloaded, positions reinforced, and counterfire roars back with new fury. The ridge does not break. Instead, it hardens. By holding through the storm, the Americans have done more than survive. They have opened the Gothic line. But victory here is not yet the end. Beyond this ridge lies the rest of Kesselring's fortress. Beyond these cliffs lies northern Italy, still under the shadow of the Reich. And though the line has cracked, Kesselring is not beaten. He will retreat, regroup, and resist again. The suspense lingers like smoke over the battlefield. You cannot help but ask, if this ridge demanded such sacrifice, what will the next battle claim? And how many more cliffs must be climbed before the war itself can end? Did the fall of the ridge break the Gothic line, or only begin a greater struggle? The ridge has fallen. Smoke still rises from shattered bunkers, wounded men cry out from makeshift aid stations, and the American flag now flutters where German sentries once laughed. But a question lingers, has this victory broken Kesselring's Gothic line, or has it only opened the door to an even greater struggle? At dawn, the battlefield is revealed in all its horror. The cliffs that were silent shadows in the night are now streaked with blood. Broken helmets, shattered rifles, and lifeless bodies cling to ledges where men had fought gravity and gunfire alike. Survivors stagger through the haze, their eyes hollow, their voices cracked from shouting and smoke. Medics move quickly, binding wounds, whispering encouragement to those fading into silence. Yet amid the grief there is triumph. The impossible has been achieved. An army scaled the unscalable, seized the impregnable, and held it against storm after storm. For the Allies, it is proof that no fortress is eternal. For the Germans, it is a scar, a reminder that even Kesselring's genius could be undone by courage and audacity. Still, the battle is not the end of war. The Gothic line stretches beyond this ridge, twisting across valleys and rivers, with more bunkers, more traps, more sacrifices waiting. The fall of one peak does not topple the entire mountain range, but it cracks the illusion. It tells every soldier staring up at stone walls that the enemy is not untouchable. And what of Kesselring? In his headquarters, reports arrive like hammer blows. Positions lost. Casualties mounting. The Americans are not retreating, they are advancing. For the first time, the smiling Albert feels the shadow of inevitability. Yet he refuses to collapse. He pulls back his forces, orders new lines formed, and prepares to bleed the Allies for every mile of Italy still held under his command. The men who climbed the cliffs know none of this. They only know the faces of the dead around them, the exhaustion in their muscles, the quiet relief that they are still breathing. For them, the ridge is no grand strategy, it is survival carved into stone. As dusk falls, a chaplain moves among the wounded, murmuring prayers. A captain writes casualty figures with shaking hands, his pencil breaking under pressure. A private, barely more than a boy, stares at the sunset with eyes that have seen too much. The ridge is secure, but the war within each man will last far longer. So the question echoes, did this night assault break the Gothic line, or did it only mark the beginning of another crucible? History answers both. The line did not collapse in one night, but it was broken piece by piece, until the German hold on Italy could no longer stand. The fall of the ridge was the first fracture, the wound that spread until the fortress crumbled. And as you picture the men clinging to cliffs in the dark, risking everything against stone and steel, you realize the truth. War is not decided by walls or weapons alone. It is decided by the courage of those who dare to climb where none believe they can, who fight where none believe they should, and who endure what no human should endure. The ridge fell. The Gothic line cracked. And in that crack, the fate of Italy, and perhaps the war itself, shifted forever.